The Big 12 has announced its men's hoops conference opponents for this upcoming season, and we calculated the strength of schedule to see who should be breathing a sigh of relief and who's got their work cut out for them. Welcome to Saturday's Warrior, and before we get into it too deep, please be sure to like the video and subscribe to the channel. It really does help us a lot. Now, when I first saw the Big 12's release of the opponents for this upcoming season of men's basketball, I wanted to see how the four incoming schools matched up with the two outgoing schools, like in football, how BYU was the only one that got both Texas and OU on their schedule, and just out of curiosity. And I found that both BYU and Cincinnati play OU twice and have Texas at home. And Houston has Texas twice and then plays OU away. So they won't have Oklahoma there at all. Whereas UCF only plays each one once. And so they have Texas away. So Texas won't be going to UCF. And then Oklahoma will be traveling there. But obviously, the Big 12 has several other blue blood or at least powerhouse programs in men's hoops. And so as I was looking at BYU's opponents, I was trying to calculate and weigh in my head, did they come out ahead? You know, they only play Houston once, but then they play Baylor twice, and and trying to figure out how they came out relative to the other schools. And then I figured, why not come up with some sort of way to calculate the strength of schedule, and then we could kind of compare. And so that's what we're going to do. So let's take a look. Okay, so what we did is we started off with the KenPom rankings for each of the schools based on where they were on Selection Sunday. And the reason why I went with them on Selection Sunday instead of the end of the season is because there was this tweet from Jerem Jordan where he had all of these already listed, and it saved me some time. And really, the rankings are going to be different by the time the actual basketball season starts anyway. So this is about as good of a measure as we have at this point, is kind of basing off of last year. What we did is basically if they play them once, you'd count that once. If they play twice, you'd count it twice. Add all that up, average it out over the 18 games, and then that gave a score. And then I got thinking as well. I also did another version adjusting for home and away. So basically, if the school, or if the game is played away, then I subtracted 0.5 from their ranking. So like BYU is playing at Houston, and so it's actually going to be that much, just to indicate that it'd be a little bit harder. So I subtracted 0.5 from that, so it's even higher than a 1 ranking in that case. Whereas Baylor plays Houston only once, but they play it at Baylor, and so I added 0.5 to that because it gives Baylor a little bit of an advantage there. So I'm just trying to account for home and away and see if that makes a difference. And then if they play twice, I didn't add or subtract. I just added them, because it would average together. So I just multiplied that by 2 and then got all that number and then averaged it out over the 18 games. And the results were fairly interesting. So let me zoom in here. So what I found is that for the most part, everybody came out pretty similar in terms of the averaged out opponent rankings, but there were a few that got considerably higher. And you can see here's the ranking. So Oklahoma State in this case has the easiest strength of schedule based on this, and actually based on both measures, they came out pretty similar. And then they get progressively harder. And you look at these, most of these, the difference in their average score was not very much. And so it's pretty much negligible. I would even say, this 2.7, not much of a difference. But then you get down here to Cincinnati and these other schools, and now you get to quite a bit of disparity. So the difference between Oklahoma State and Oklahoma is 6.9 in average of um, ranking here of their opponents, and so that is a pretty big difference right there. But when looking at these, something to keep in mind is that teams that are ranked lower obviously won't be playing themselves. So, for example, BYU was ranked the lowest at 85, I believe. So BYU doesn't play BYU to bring down that average, and so that's going to impact it a little bit. And so all of these schools were amongst the lowest in the rankings. If you come look at it, you see here all those same schools are ranked the lowest. So it kind of makes sense. They can't play themselves, and so naturally you're going to have more opponents with a higher ranking. So that was fair. But then I noticed UCF, which was the second lowest ranked team here, is not. They actually got quite a considerable shake there, considering they had a lower score. And so I know they played BYU twice. That probably affects it. And then also Cincinnati twice. And so those two, playing those two opponents twice probably helped them quite a bit. But I still thought it was interesting just how high they were on this ranking compared to these other teams. And so, that is a bit of a difference. And if you look here, even if we take my system for accounting for home and away to see if that made much of a difference, not really. You see that Kansas makes a little bit of a jump there, or Iowa State, you could argue, has a slightly easier schedule than it might look, but and BYU goes from 13th to 12th. Tough, in terms of easiest schedule. So there's a lot of other factors to take into account. How the schedule shakes out when these games fall is going to make an impact as well. And plus, some teams are going to be better than others once we get into it, and or vice versa, they're going to be worse. And so again, these aren't the final rankings, so it'll be really interesting to see. So what do you think? Is the way they divvied out the opponents fair, or do some teams have a legitimate case to complain? Let us know in the comments. And if you haven't liked the video and subscribed already, what are you waiting for? Please do that. We really appreciate it, and we'll catch you next time.